so I'm coming at you with another doubleheader review this week. We're going to kick things off by looking at Manborg, the new picture from Astron 6. We're going to follow that up with a look at the remake of Maniac, the 1980s cult slasher. But first, the hotness. This week was a great week for trailers. We had two really notable ones drop, and then a short film that kind of flew under the radar I really want to bring to everybody's attention. The first one that really hit, kind of blew everybody's heads off, was the trailer for Ender's Game, which is the feature film, which is based on the novel by Orson Scott Card. It's a sci-fi novel about a kid who gets taken away to a space station to train to fight aliens. It's a really great novel. I highly recommend it. And this is a really poppin' trailer. There's a lot of shit going on, a lot of orange, a lot of blue. Everything seems to blow up. And for people who are familiar with the novels, you're going to be really excited to see certain things in play. Characters like Graf, the battle room, which looks outstanding. We got a great cast with Harrison Ford, who is really old these days apparently, and Ben Kingsley, who's got tattoos all over his face. This is a great looking picture, and it also shows the end of the book right in the trailer, which is interesting. Also, which dropped this week, was a look at the new movie from Edgar Wright starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. This would be The World's End, which honestly I didn't really have too much of a clue of what was going on in this movie. I'd seen the posters, I'd seen a little bit of teasers here and there. I was sort of under the impression that this was a sort of apocalypse movie, and after seeing the trailer, I couldn't have been more wrong. It looks like pretty much what you're expecting from those three guys. It looks like fan service to those of us who really got off on Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. This is a really, really funny looking movie. It's got Martin Freeman in it also, who I think is just great. I'm going to link to both of those, make sure everybody gets a look at those. But lastly, before we move on to reviews, I want to point out the short fan film Judge Minty was released this week. And this is actually a movie that exists inside the Judge Dredd universe. It's a comic book from England that began in the pages of an anthology called 2000 AD. I'm sure you're probably at least aware of Judge Dredd. He's sort of a cultural thing from England that's managed to really sort of happen in the United States. We had a movie in the 90s that nobody really likes to talk about. There's a movie last year with Carl Urban, which I still have not seen. I hear it's pretty good. But I'm a bit of a fan of Judge Dredd, and I'm very pleased to say that this is a movie that really makes it happen for people who are familiar with the Judge Dredd universe. Judge Minty is an aging old judge who is just not really fit for the job anymore, so he goes out to the cursed earth, which is the kind of the nuclear wasteland. And this is a movie that really does it right. I mean, every little detail is great. The judge uniforms are outstanding. The guns do what they're supposed to do. The bad guys are just totally on par. This is outstanding. You can bet I'm totally going to link you to it. It's probably been playing up in here somewhere. So that's that. On with the reviews. Manborg comes from Astron 6, who are a filmmaking collective based out of Winnipeg, Canada, and they first came to broader attention with the release last year of their film Father's Day, which Troma put out. But before that, I caught wind of them by way of like Twitch Film when they released the sort of short film / mock trailer for a movie called Laser Ghosts 2: Return to Laser Cove. Astron 6 specialized in sort of nostalgic riffs on movies that went direct to video in the 80s and 90s. And their stuff kind of has a feel like they grew up watching a lot of movies by Albert Kuhn. I don't even know where to begin with this one. Manborg starts in media res in the middle of the Hell Wars, where mankind is pitted against demons from hell who've got like weapons and shit. Before he was Manborg, he's just a soldier, and his brother is his commanding officer. And he witnesses his brother's death at the hands of the evil Lord Draculon. And he goes off to get his revenge, and he's cut down by the armies of hell. But lo, he wakes up in the future, and he's bristling with equipment, gear, futuristic shit just covering his body. And he is now Manborg. He's resurrected into this new sort of futuristic world, which is mostly demons living in this sort of dystopic society. And right off the bat, he's captured by the armies of hell, and he's thrown into a prison with Justice, who's a sort of tough-talking badass who has guns on his person. Can't seem to use them to escape. Also in jail with him is Justice's sister Mina, who wields knives. And then there's also the karate-fighting #1 man. And these people together are going to stage a daring escape from their prison, which will ultimately bring them into direct conflict with Lord Draculon 2.0, this sort of new badasser version of Lord Draculon. And Lord Draculon's science project, Shadow Mega. And inevitably, there's a Colosseum fight gladiator scene. During this time, Manborg kind of comes into his own. At first, he doesn't really know how to use all the stuff that's on him, but he's sort of forced to figure it out, and he forms a bond of friendship with him. The movie is a pastiche of sci-fi Frankenstein-type movies like RoboCop and The Vindicator, especially Eliminators, which if you're a kid who grew up on VHS culture in the 80s, you've probably seen this movie, and you probably have some pretty good feelings about it. The poster for it is probably floating right up here. But Manborg was made on a micro budget, and if you believe the talk from Astron 6, and there's really no reason not to, it also looks it. The look of the movie is all green screen, and the keying makes me feel not quite so bad about this stuff. So thanks, Astron 6. But it's funny, and that's really all that matters. I mean, Astron 6 is so effective at making these nostalgia movies that this is a movie that really would have looked perfectly in place on a video store shelf in 1990. A sci-fi trash fest that was out to exploit the popularity of something like RoboCop 2. The special effects are really, really cheap, and the acting is so corny, and the writing is very, very bad. But I mean that in the best way possible. There's also not much of a story to speak of, but that's okay. The movie gets carried away with its own silliness in such a way that it carries the entire picture. You're going to love characters like Justice or the Baron, who is constantly making these really awkward advances towards his prisoner Mina. It was a real high point of the movie. Normally I tend to look down on movies that kind of force the foolishness. Filmmakers tend to go out with the intention of making a bad movie, and then it kind of backfires on them when it all seems forced. But Astron 6 do it with such a natural flow that the badness really comes through in a way that is highly enjoyable. I really can't recommend this movie enough. So up next, we have Maniac from director Frank Calhoun, starring Elijah Wood, which is a remake of the 1980 slasher film by William Lustig. Maniac is about Frank, who is a young man living in Los Angeles, and by day he restores department store mannequins, and by night he stalks and murders women to satisfy a sort of compulsive need to punish his mother, who's a pretty terrible person. His work draws the attention of an artist, a photographer named Anna, and the two of them initially hit it off, and he tries to foster a sort of functional relationship with her. But this is a serial killer movie, and we all know how those end. I might have been inclined to dismiss this movie were it not for a couple of things. Lustig's version from 1980 is a favorite of mine. It's a nasty, nasty movie with a real trashy, hard edge. I didn't really feel like it was a movie that needed to be remade, but do any of them need to be remade? Thankfully, Calhoun brings a couple bold ideas to the table that really rescues this movie from the bargain bin for me. The most important being that this is a point-of-view movie. It's shot from behind Frank's eyes, meaning everything we see is what Frank sees. It's like we're riding along with him. I've really never seen this before. I caught it once in Enter the Void, but that's like the only time I've ever seen this. You only ever catch glimpses of the movie's star, Elijah Wood, occasionally in reflections. And it's a real bummer, too, because for such a strong idea, the movie is actually really limp. It should be a very uncomfortable place being behind the eyes of a serial killer. Being in the mind of a serial killer should be a really nasty thing, but many opportunities to explore serial killer pathology are sort of passed up in favor of a series of murder set pieces that unfold. At least in the original movie, you had Frank Zito's sort of mask of sanity, but the Frank in this movie is so awkward and weird that there's really no mask of sanity to speak of. I mean, he really kind of comes off as like autistic or like an Asperger's type person. I have a really hard time believing that Frank of the Maniac remake could have a conversation with anybody for more than a couple of minutes without freaking them out, let alone sort of maneuver an online date that winds up going back to the woman's apartment so they can have sex. I mean, I don't care how drunk you are. Frank is so fucking strange. There's no look at Frank's selection process. He just seems to randomly find women around the city and kill them. There's no ritual. There's no stalking. He just kind of finds these opportunities to murder women. And while I don't put too much stock in the horror movie Thrill Ride, the violence against women is so wanton and intense in this movie that it's pretty misogynistic, and I was a little uncomfortable with that. At least in a lot of these slasher movies, we're given a triumphant final girl to kind of round things out in the end, but we're sort of cheated on that front in this movie. The kills are seriously nasty, though. This is a violent movie. There's a lot of imagery in it that brings up imagery from the original. There's a strangulation scene during sexy time. There's a chase scene through a subway, which lacks all the intensity of the original, which is one of my favorite scenes of any stalk and slash movie ever. There's also a scene that kind of ends with Frank striking the pose from the original movie's poster art, which is kind of a nice touch, I guess. The soundtrack's great, also. It is composed by Rob, who, that's all you get, Rob. I don't know who that is. But it's got the sort of proggy, synthesizer-heavy soundtracks from the time. It really kind of brings to mind a lot of the modern sort of stuff that's really kind of playing on the throwback circuit, like Zombie and Umberto and Perturbator. The song Goodbye Horses is also on it, you know, that song by Q Lazarus. I gotta think that was in there on purpose. So there you are, Manborg and Maniac. One's great, one is mediocre. Before I go, I want to know if you've seen these movies, either of them. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next Friday, but right now, I'm going to make like a tree and get out of here.